Alright guys, this is the last video for Unit 1 review. We're on Activity 4. It's got the Doctor Strange logo on it. Those of you that know me, I like to do my stuff in alphabetical order, and I couldn't think of very many superheroes that started with D that had appropriate logos. So we went with Doctor Strange, and it's a little unrecognizable, but now you know. The more you know. Okay, Activity 4 was all on absolute value equations. Absolute value. The absolute value bars calculates the distance of this quantity from 0. And distance is always positive. So when we, let's say I'm looking for something that would give me the absolute value of 3. Well, if I take the absolute value of 3, absolute value of 3 is 3. But I could also take the absolute value of -3. So if I take the absolute value of -3, I'll also get 3. So I should have two values that I can take the absolute value of to get +3. And that's important because when we solve these, you should end up with two solutions. Something else to notice, so this is the graph of absolute value. If you take a look at this, you'll notice that there's no negative values here. Absolute value, basically those absolute value bars make the quantity positive. So if I take the absolute value of something, it should always equal a positive number. It should not equal a negative number. So that's going to be important when we go to solve these. So again, you should always have two equations, two solutions, unless you take the absolute value of 0, because we're calculating distance from 0. Absolute value of 0 is 0. There's nothing else that will give me 0 other than 0. So this is the only time we'll have one solution, is when it's equal to 0. But any other time when you're solving for absolute value, when you're trying to figure out what will give me, what can I take the absolute value of to give me 7, I should have two solutions. I should have the positive and the negative. That does not mean that when we solve these, that we'll always have a positive and negative value for the variable. That just means that whatever's inside the absolute value bars has to equal a positive and has to equal a negative, so that when we take the absolute value of it, we get this quantity. So this could be two positive numbers or two negative numbers that would give me this quantity, but doesn't mean that this has to be a positive or a negative, but we will solve for a positive or negative. I hope that was pretty clear. I think it'll be more clear as we practice this. Okay, so we have the absolute value of m plus 3 equals 7. So again, we know that when we take the absolute value of 7, we get 7. And when we take the absolute value of -7, we get 7. So whatever's in absolute value bars has to equal +7, or it could equal -7. So we're solving two separate equations. One for +7, one for -7. So let's start with that. So we're going to solve for m. We're going to subtract 3 from each side. And we get m equals 4. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to subtract 3 from each side. But here we get m equals -10. So these are the two options we have. M could either be 4 or -10. Both of those numbers, when we take the absolute value of it, will give us +7. Okay. Alright, so let's look at B. So the absolute value of x minus 1 plus 5 equals 2. Oops, excuse me, just a second. Let me get these papers organized. Okay. So first thing I would do, let's subtract 5 from each side. Let's get the absolute value bars isolated. So we have the absolute value of x minus 1. Let me make those a little longer so you don't think they're a 1. Equals -3. 2 minus 5 is -3. So remember, when you take the absolute value of something, when you take the absolute value of something, you will have a positive quantity. And this is negative. You can't take the absolute value and get a negative. So there is no solution, because whatever you plug in here, once you take the absolute value of it, you get a positive number. So here there's no solution. All right, C. Again, we're going to get the absolute value bars by themselves. So let's subtract 8 from each side. We have 9 times 4p plus 2 in absolute value, in absolute value equals 35 minus 8 is 27. Alright, so I get this question all the time, and it's, can I distribute into absolute value? And the answer is yes, you can, as long as this is a positive number. If this is a negative number, then you cannot. It does change the whole, because it's absolute value and it deals with sign issues, it messes things up. So since you can only do it with a positive number, and I know my kids and I know me, I will forget. If I get in the habit of distributing, I'm going to forget when I get to something like this that has a negative, and I'm going to distribute the negative and ruin my whole problem. So as a rule for me, because I'm ditzy, since I can't always do it, I never do it. So I'm going to divide both sides by 9 and cancel that out. And that gives me smaller numbers to work with anyway, and that makes my problem a little bit easier. So the absolute value of 4p plus 2 is equal to 3. And so now I have the absolute value bars by itself. I have a number by itself. I'm going to go ahead and solve my 2 equations. So I have 4p plus 2 equals 3. And 4p plus 2 equals negative 3. I'm going to subtract the 2 from each side. I'm going to solve both equations at the same time because I'm lazy and just kind of, this is my 4th video in one day, and I'm kind of like, okay, let's get her done. So I got 4p equals 1. Over here I have 4p equals negative 5. Alright, let's divide both sides by 4. By the way, it is okay to have a fraction as your answer. I know a lot of people don't like that, but it is okay. So we're going to cancel this out. We should have p equals 1/4. Cancel this out, and we have p equals negative 5/4. And it's okay if it's improper. Like, in all honesty, an improper fraction is a lot nicer to look at than like a big, long, ugly decimal. And just, it's 2 whole numbers on top of each other. I don't know. I just prefer fractions. And we can leave this like this because these are simplified. If you want to make that a mixed number, go for it. I'm not going to. No. No. 5/4 is a pretty number. Okay. So let's go down to D. So now we have inequalities. And so you remember when you divide by or multiply by a negative, it changes the sign. Since we are splitting this into 2 equations, and on one of them we change the sign of this number, we're going to flip that inequality as well. Follows that same rule. So we're going to split this. This is 9 minus 4n is less than 5. We also have 9 minus 4n is greater than negative 5. Sorry, it's all kind of running together. Okay, so let's subtract 9 from all of our sides. And we have 4n is less than negative 4. Ooh, negative 4n. Don't drop that negative like I did. And negative 4n is greater than negative 14. We're going to divide all of our sides by negative 4. And remember, when you divide by negative, you flip your sign. So these will cancel. You have n is greater than 1. These will cancel. You have n is less than 14 over 4. Now that's that fraction's okay, but you can simplify it. You can divide both the top and bottom, both the numerator and denominator, by 2. And this becomes 7 over 2. So my final answer is the n is greater than 1, but less than 7/2, which is 3.5. So we have 1 is less than n, which is less than 7/2. I would leave it as a fraction. The reason I converted this into a decimal is because we do have to graph it. Zero, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 3.5, so we're going to put our circle here. And then over 1. And we're going to connect. Yay! Okay, E. So, we're going to divide both sides by the -4 because we can't distribute that negative. This will cancel. We are left with the absolute value of 6b minus 8 is greater than or equal to -3. Remember, we divide by negative, it flips our sign. So before we start solving this, let's think about this for just a minute. Absolute value bars will make our number positive. So when we take the absolute value of something, we get a positive number. So the absolute value of something is greater than or equal to -3. It doesn't matter what we plug into here because whatever we get will be positive, which is automatically greater than -3. So B is all real numbers. Again, because no matter what we plug in, we could plug in a negative number for B, but those absolute value bars will make it positive, which will in fact be a number greater than -3. So B is all real numbers. Another way to put it, there are infinitely many solutions. So there's really nothing to graph here. There's really nothing to solve here. This is going to be all real numbers or infinitely many solutions because there's nothing to plug in that's going to be less than a negative when you take the absolute value of it. It doesn't work. Okay. F. Alright, so for F, let's go ahead, let's add 2 to each side. We're going to get the absolute value bars by themselves. We have 2/3 times the absolute value of 4v plus 6 is less than or equal to 12. Okay, then to cancel out the fraction, because I know that's what most of y'all want to do, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, the 3 and the 3 cancel, the 2 and the 2 cancel. We're left with the absolute value of 4v plus 6 is less than or equal to. So let's try to reduce this first. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 times 3 is 18. So I have 4v plus, the absolute value of 4v plus 6 is less than or equal to 18. So we're going to split this into 2. We have 4v plus 6 less than or equal to 18. And 4v plus 6 greater than or equal to -18. Let's subtract 6. Okay, 6 is canceled. We have 4v is less than or equal to 12 on this one. These cancel. 4v is greater than or equal to -24. All right, let's divide by 4. These cancel. V is less than or equal to 3. V is greater than or equal to -6. So V is less than +3 but greater than or equal to -6. So we can write this with the V in between. There's our final answer when we graph it. Okay, let's do -6, -3, 0, and 3. Okay, and these are both going to be colored in because they're both equal to, so they're closed circles, and connected because it's an and. Yay! All right, so that is the end of the Unit 1 review. I think everything else after this is independent practice. So feel free to reach out to your teachers with any questions you have. Feel free to watch these videos as many times as you need to. There's also a written guided practice if you'd like to use that as well. Have a good evening and talk to you soon.